I hereby confer the award of Honorary Doctor of Letters of Bath Spa University to Hilary Mantel. It's a matter of enormous pride to me that Faye has agreed to work with us at Bath Spa University, and it's a great delight to me to introduce Faye in conversation with the newest member of our academic community, Dr. Hilary Mantel. So I leave it to you.
Well, it's very nice to be praised, and thank you very much. And Hilary, you must be very used to it at the moment. In a way, one becomes an object and has to withstand that in a way in order just to get on with the work, which seems the most central and important part of what one does.
I had my portrait painted yesterday.
Exactly. I saw that.
Talking of becoming an object. And actually the painter was a very intelligent and very sympathetic young man. And we talked a lot about how he prepares for his work, how I prepare for mine. There turned out to be certain similarities and a great meeting of minds, really, about the riskiness inherent in the creative process. But I was saying to him that I thought that being commissioned to paint a writer was the hardest thing of all, because, to state the obvious, nothing of what we do shows on the surface. Nothing of what we are is there to be seen. And you know this because in films, where writers are part of the story, you always see the excruciating difficulty of portraying them. And writers are always shown despairing, tearing their hair, ripping up their work, and in extremity, throwing their typewriter out of the window. And so they're shown not writing. But the act of writing itself, what's to see? You know, someone with a grim expression scratching away. And I said to the painter, photographers come, and sometimes they are there all day and they take scores of photographs. And I think, what do you want? Tell me what you want and I'll try to give it to you. But there is a real paradox here. Constantly being looked at, but unable to show anything except on the page.
It's true. It's true. But actually, you see, if they film you writing, it seems to be more interesting than if they're trying to film you. You get more, I think, from just simply watching the hand upon the page. But then you're watching a handwrite, not a computer key going down, which seems to me a different matter altogether.
Yes, but then people have this bright idea, we'll photograph you at your desk.
Yes.
As if they were the first person in the world ever to think of that.
And then you tidy up the desk.
Yes.
And sort of wipe all the old leaves and the old crumbs off it.
Because it's piled high with mail order catalogues or something like that. and yes, you can only show people on the page what you are. But you know all about this because you've had a high profile throughout your career, and you've been in the public eye for a lot longer than I have. And if I may say, you do it so gracefully.
Well, I have
Any advice?
Well, I just have an easy disposition. I have an easy disposition and a gregarious nature, and it's an act, but it's not an act. I mean,
Okay.
you just simply you just respond to people. Actually, oddly enough, you tell the truth. I always found that much easier. You don't try and...
Well, this is an innovation, I must say.
Well, it is.
That'll never catch on.
It is so much easier, actually, because you don't have to remember anything and you don't have to present yourself. I was just thinking, it was ages before I realized that when you had your photograph taken for America or somewhere, you had to have your hair done. I thought it was one's honest duty to present oneself to the public as you were, you see, which was a very different matter. But you did learn, and eventually you learned about the whole thing of having your hair done or all the rest of it. I've given that up, I must say, quite a lot. But that's simply as you get older and older and older, you can see that, you know, that what you are is eventually revealed. So you don't bother to reveal anything else. You just present yourself, and then people will have to... The publicity people worry. Publishers worry, but really one doesn't have to. And one does stand or fall by one's work, and one is only ever as good as one's last book. So there's a perpetual worry, you know, that you won't be able to write the next book. But, you know, the years go by and still you do, so you rely on the past.
I'm interested in this business of being gregarious, because I think most writers think of themselves as mavericks and individualists and solitary introverts, and then yet go to a writer's gathering, and there they all are, glass in hand, roaring away, and
talking about money mostly.
Each one believes then that they are the only solitary introvert, and they're all putting on an act.
Yes, I think. Yes, no, I don't know. I just always lived by my friends and talking and playground sort of conversation, and I just really like that to continue. And, you know, and I'm always much more pleased when somebody rings me up, because then I don't have to write the next sentence, you know. So in a kind of way, it's...
The person from Porlock, say?
No, the persons from Porlock are always coming to the door, but, you know, but I always engage them in conversation. I don't turn them away.
Well, you know that Stevie Smith poem about Coleridge and the person from Porlock?
Yes.
Because she, you know, her idea about the person from Porlock is that he's not an interruption, but a highly welcome distraction. I long for the person from Porlock.
Well, exactly.
To bring my thoughts to an end. I am impatient to see him. I think of him as a friend. Anyway, I want to tell the audience about the first time I met you. May I do that?
Yes, please.
When I published my first book in 1985, Faye wrote a very generous letter to my publisher. And sometime later, the BBC approached my publisher, that is, about a television adaptation. And Faye was approached to write it. And we had a meeting, which you were saying you remember, in a restaurant in Shepherd's Bush.
Yes, a little cafe. Mm-hmm. And we had a cup of coffee, and you sat there, and I remember it absolutely, extraordinarily, a long time ago, but it sort of stuck in one's mind.
You ordered butter chicken.
Well, there you go.
Desmond Lynham was sitting 2 tables away on our left.
It was when Lime Grove was round the corner, yes.
And the script editor got the two of us together, and Faye said that she was interested in exploring this, but she turned to me and said, "Do you really want to write this yourself? Because if you do, and you do not know how, I will teach you." And that is the most generous offer of help I have ever received from a writer. You set a very high standard right at the start of my career. I was very touched because I knew you meant it.
Yes.
And of course, that would have been a tremendous thing to do. It would have been a great diversion away from your own work. And it was a sort of wonderful act of faith. And it's stuck with me almost like a proverb that this is what you must do, actually. You must give a hand to other people. You must at least make the offer. Nothing came of it.
Yes, what did come of it? But it was a wonderful book. I was just rereading it actually this week on Kindle.
You
and it's
remember,
marvellous. I remember it very well.
There's an issue of good taste.
Yes.
Every option, every company or producer who's been interested in it and its sequel comes up against this in the end, that they think the viewers might complain.
Yes, however, the viewers might complain.
You know, they never see that until they've been working on it for some time. And I'm quite happy to let them find out in their own way and in their own time. But I never expect it to be made.
But I still feel that. And why aren't you writing the television version of the trilogy?
Well, because I think I've got no track record in TV.
It's not all that difficult.
In order... well, I'll take you up on that later.
No, but anyway, they're doing it. You've got a very good person doing it, so it should be all right.
This is, you know, somebody's got to find £8 million somewhere. And they're going to do it on the back of known names.
Yes.
Director, writer, star. So we need a writer with a track record. And also, frankly, my job, although I am involved and I will be involved, but as with the stage productions, but TV doesn't go into action until next year. They start filming in April. I need to be getting on with the third part of the trilogy. And I have to see it as my job to generate more material that other people can go to work with if they like. Yes. But I'm certainly ready to push on.
So how is it going?
Well, the book is interestingly poised. I'm not a writer who begins at the beginning. Whether I'm writing contemporary fiction or historical fiction, I write scenes and I amass material and build up some parts of the book quite intensively while others remain more sketchy. And then at quite a late stage, I have to stitch it all together. And this means that I can never say to my publisher, well, I am 200,000 words in. I could offer to weigh it if they liked. Or I can say it needs 18 months. But I can never say I'm up to this point because I'm always up to 6 different points simultaneously. That's really the only way I know how to do it. But I have been putting in a lot of work over a long time, preparatory work with the RSC version, which I've been much more involved in. And now we are in rehearsal, and frighteningly, the 2 plays open at Stratford next month. So it's a really intensive, exhilarating time. And I'm learning really fast. And I think all this ultimately will help the third book.
Yes.
It's very clarifying.
Well, you're just examining your characters more and more, and as soon as you see actors act them, they kind of come to life. Though the danger is that you begin to see the characters as the people who are acting them, so that somehow the physical shape of them sort of changes from the thing in your head into what is there.
Yes, and particularly difficult when you have two completely different sets of people.
Yes.
as I will have
as
by
with the
next
television.
spring.
Yes, no, the television will be more exacting and more horrifying, I fear, than the stage.
By the time it's a finished product, though, I should think I will have written my book.
Yes.
Because it won't be shown until sometime in 2015.
Yeah.
By that time, I hope to be ready to publish the third part of the trilogy.
I mean, part of the whole trouble with television, I think, well, actually with books, they take so, with a historical book, it's safer, but with a contemporary book, it takes so long to put something on television. By the time it's done, the public kind of, the gestalt, I mean, the whole zeitgeist has moved on to something else, and so it sort of tends to limp behind, but it doesn't happen with history. I mean, you're dealing with the past anyway, so you don't have to worry about what people are going to think. They're going to think what they're going to think anyway, so it's all right. But
that wouldn't really have occurred to me.
See, my early books were actually television plays novelised.
Yes.
You see, because I didn't know how to write novels, and when I began, so only wrote television. It was only when you wrote television that you understood how to move a plot along. You understood something had to happen, it had to be somewhere, and then to get people out of rooms, which I found so difficult when I started writing novels. You just edit, you just cut, you just put them somewhere else and start writing. But, I found sort of if you were writing a party scene, you sort of didn't know what you were going to look at. You didn't know, you thought you had to put in everything. You didn't see how you could. I mean, I don't know. I read a great deal, but without sort of judgment on noticing what I was reading at all at first. And then writing television, you learn that, first this happens, then that happens, then that happens, and, then something else happens, and it all comes together, and then it all sort of falls away, and it comes to an end. And so the writing the novel was just describing what if you have a television play the director keeps doing wrongly. And it was a sort of power thing that if you actually write the novel, you control everything. You control the actors, you control... And yet having, once actors had worked upon it, you knew much more about them. I think now I can kind of do it myself without needing the actor there. So actually you're just acting the whole thing anyway.
Well, that's a really interesting insight into the way your fiction works. Because above all, I mean, I think back to reading your early books long, long before I knew you. And above all, they were so entertaining. They were so swift. They were so straight to the point. And I think you've just told us why. And it's not a bad way to start off,
Well, you've got the plot out of the way. And after you got the plot, because the plot was just there, you'd written it, you could then just entertain and have some fun, and and you'd done all the hard work, and what was left was just frills, really.
Well, but your work's very dynamic, and I think that's right there from your very earliest books. And so, this business of cutting off a scene, I think as a novelist, you get more daring about that as time goes on. You know how to get out of a scene. I know when I started, I sort of wanted to tell the reader everything. And then you become aware that actually quite swift transitions are possible if you do them confidently. And also, my tip, especially with short stories, I always say to people, have a look at the first 2 paragraphs and see if you can lose them. And you often can, because it's a kind of throat clearing. It's the roll of the drums.
It is, yes.
And it's sometimes the action, where does the action start? Well, often somewhere down in the third paragraph. And then another thing, of course, that people do is they use the last paragraph to point the moral and adorn the tale, you know, and often the last paragraph goes to.
Yes.
But what applies in short fiction applies in long fiction as well.
Well, it's 4 pages. It's the first 4 pages. I mean, I keep telling students, you know, just cut your first 4 pages and begin there, and, you know, because you've just been working your way into it. But actually, you know, you've done all that. The reader doesn't need to know that. That's for you to know, not the reader.
Yes.
And actually, you have to bear your reader in mind all the time. And the problem is, with a lot of writers, that they're worrying about themselves, that they're trying to express themselves. They're not trying to communicate, because what you're doing is telling a story to people. You're telling them. I mean, I can't tell stories to children. I'm hopeless. I mean, I can write them just about, you're still telling. You are using language. You're using words from the page to kind of inform and entertain.
That is, well, the hardest thing I find is always controlling the flow of information to the reader. And not too much, not too little. Sometimes you have to make a hard choice. But you have to be able to put yourself in the place of the reader. And I always find with any book, there comes a point where I have to write a little section that's just for myself called What Do I Know? Meaning, if I'm the reader.
Yes.
And I really have to do it in that mechanical
way. But you see,
way.
this is because you don't start at the beginning. You see,
Yes.
I mean, if you do that, I mean, only one of my books I did that with, and you sort of sit on the floor with all these bits around you, and then you've got to put them all together. And the problem of remembering what people know and what they don't know is that I find it's sort of a terrible burden, and it's the right way to do it, I think. But I tend to think and write nothing, or write about 10 first pages.
Yes.
And then simply give them up. But by the time you've done that, you more or less know who they are and what it's about.
So you sort of audition them.
So I audition them, and you see if this one works, and the easiest one you go with.
I mean, the thing about information flow, giving information to the reader, is one of the decisions you've got to take is that your reader is at least intelligent as you are, possibly more, and that the reader is quick on the uptake.
Yes.
And people get better all the time at absorbing narrative.
Yes.
Because of TV storytelling,
Yes.
they get more slick all the time. And, you know, I mean, the difference really shows over the years. Well, a few years ago, very late, much later than everyone else, I watched the Jewel in the Crown. And I watched it just over several nights. And I came to a part of it about 2/3 of the way through, where I shook my head in wonderment and said, that was a really slick piece of storytelling, really daring, and it came off. Only to find that I'd missed out an entire CD. But those days of that leisurely unfolding of a narrative, the Jewel in the Crown, Brideshead Revisited, it really had its pleasures. But I think those days are gone.
They are. And just in the very early days of television soaps, I remember, no, this was even before my time, which is a long time ago, you had to film somebody. Viewers were so slow that you had to show somebody going out of a door out of their living room and saying, I'm going into the kitchen now. Then you would cut to the kitchen and you would show them coming into the kitchen. And then they could make their cup of tea or whatever it was. But viewers learn and readers learn. And I think this is sort of what is happening now, that readers are just so quick on the uptake.
Yes.
If you look at the books on Kindle now that are doing so well, they're all used, everybody is very quick on the uptake indeed.
Well, when the TV producer for the Thomas Cromwell novels came to see me, we met for the first time a fortnight ago. I was delighted to find that he had no track record in historical drama at all, and he hadn't even watched it. And, you know, this is the best possible news for me.
He wrote The Man Who Stared at Goats, wasn't it? Was this him? Anyway, this was a film he directed, I think, and wrote. But anyway, I may be wrong.
Well,
a very eccentric and wonderful film.
It's you know, we had a conversation in which I said to him that to me there are two great problems with historical drama. An old one and a new one. And the old one is exposition. Characters telling each other what they already know. And it hangs so heavy. On historical fiction, it's just that it's true, but it's more obvious when it's on the screen. And you have to be clever, and you have to find indirect and cunning ways of giving the reader, the viewer, what they need to know as background. But I did say to Peter Kuzminski, if you have to have an audience spoon-fed or baffled, which will you take? And he said baffled, which yes, I always vote for. Good. Give people the credit for being able to work things out. If not immediately, then when they think about it later.
I think people have a folk knowledge, actually, of how we were in the past. I sometimes think they're so quick on the uptake that it's because they somehow know in their sort of race memory of what it was like to be then. Otherwise, you wouldn't rationally be able to work out what was going on, but they do.
Yes, I think that's possibly true. I mean, what I have been up against in the Cromwell novels was telling people quite briskly, you do not, you know, what you think you know, you do not know. We will start again. And what you're trying to do in a way is sweep out their preconceptions. And I'm hoping that aspect of the project will carry forward because we have a TV director who is going to direct it as if it were, we were talking about contemporary politics. It's Peter Kuzminski who's made programs about, I mean, likely fictionalized versions of stories about the Falklands, about Northern Ireland. He's sort of politically in every fibre of his being. And he is going to treat this as if it were a contemporary story. I don't mean that it will be authentic, but and we will not be pretending that the Tudors are like us, but we will have no period flummery, and I hope none of the second vice, which is something that's overtaken historical drama very recently, which is empty gorgeousness.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I don't know if anyone's seen The Borgias. Will anyone admit to having seen The Borgias? Yeah. Well, you know, I sit before the screen open-mouthed at the effects they make. The beautiful, beautiful pictures. And then you realise that what you are watching is, at best, the equivalent of a comic strip.
Yeah.
It is complete nonsense, but it looks so beautiful. But it's too easy.
Yes, well, it's just props department taking over and costume departments taking over in the BBC. Honestly, they're very powerful. And actually, the trouble is the power of the writer, you see, gets, I think, less and less, but the power of the writer is absolutely crucial and important because they can't do a thing without the writer, but they think they can.
Well, that is a rather sobering thought, isn't it, when you see hundreds of people employed on bringing these things to the screen or the stage, and you sort of think, oh, I caused all that.
Yes,
Does it
no, it's
ever
wonderful.
stop you in your tracks?
No, I think that's wonderful. I mean, I love that. No, it's true. It does give you, I mean, it's an incredibly exhilarating thing to be doing too, actually, especially stage, I think. It's just marvellous to actually to have your words taken so seriously. Even, have they put you to music yet? I mean, even more so if they sing your words. It's lovely. But I do always feel, actually, with the theatre, especially with young writers, when, you know, with their first play, and it's a success, and they go to the front of the stage, and they say they owe it all to the cast and the director, and thank you all so much, and you've made it all for me. And I think, well, actually, no, it would probably have been a much better play if only they'd done exactly what he said in the way that he said it first. It would have worked. But you know,
Have you been set to music?
Yes, I've been set. Well, I've had a couple of operas. I mean, you know, one was a child's opera, and one is a sort of meant to be a television, a sort of CD version of an opera, but that is still, you know, in the budding stage, and has been in the budding stage for the last 5 years. But the music, you know, the music is there, and the sample CD is there, and it's lovely to, you know, because this is extremely gratifying, I must say.
An enterprising Australian soprano is... No, there's an interesting conjunction of words. An enterprising Australian soprano is attempting to make an opera out of my book Flood.
Yes. Oh, that's wonderful.
Which,
yes,
I can see it.
Yes.
I can't quite hear it, that's the truth.
Have we got to stop?
No, you don't have to stop at all, but if you did feel like inviting some questions.
Yes, if we could have some questions or complaints or participants from the audience, that would be really nice. And there is a roving mic, so you would
I've got the big job of pointing. There you are. No, please use the mic.
There's a lot of discussion at the moment about social mobility. Do you think Thomas Cromwell would have got to a place of eminence if he was born in our age?
Well, I take your point, but, you know, to take the questions seriously, the formidable power of hierarchy in the 16th century was much greater than it is in our world. And that is what makes his career so truly remarkable. Because in those days, if you were a poor boy and you were smart, your way to success was through the church. And he didn't choose that path. And I suppose it's one of the reasons why I was so interested in his story. I wanted to know how that career was constructed against all the odds. Now, if you're a poor boy and smart today, I don't know what to do.
Sorry, I don't want to block anyone. Congratulations to you both on such wonderful books and on tonight. A very trivial question relative to social mobility, but of the books that you've both written, which would be the ones that you'd consider the hardest slog to get onto the page?
Oh, I can easily do that. I don't know if you... Do you want to go first?
No, I don't.
She writes them all with consummate ease. I have a book called A Change of Climate. And it is a book that I got stuck with so many times. And I think there were two reasons. And one is that I set out to write a very traditional narrative, something like a Victorian novel, to see if I could do it. And there were a lot of times when I thought the answer is no. But it's a good process to go through. It's a good test because no fakery. You can't just have a character catch fire if you've got tired of them. Although actually that does happen in Victorian fiction, doesn't it? Yes, but I'd organised a bit of spontaneous combustion in Flood for one of the hate figures in the book. And you simply can't do that. So it's a test of narrative technique. But the other thing is that the book is about a secret. And I have realised this, that just as in the lives of the characters, the secret was damped down, suppressed. It was what they could not speak of and what they had no way of speaking about. Exactly the same mechanism operated on the writer of the book. The secret did not want to get onto the page. And I had not devised the language in which to reveal the secret. So it was an interesting conjunction of problems, and I fought it onto the page. And I felt that, you know, when it came out, the press was good, the critical reception was good. And in fact, I think possibly there are people who like that one of my novels who don't like any of the others, because it is a different sort of animal. But what I always remember about it was how narrow the line is between success and failure, because you toil over something, you spend hours and hours on a paragraph. And then I do remember one day realizing in a split second that I must pick up chapter 5 and put it where chapter 4 was, vice versa, and that would sort the narrative. And if I'd not had that moment, I really believe the book would have been a failure. It was one of these split time schemes. You're going between Norfolk in 1980 and Southern Africa at the end of the 50s. So the vital issue, technically, is where you change off from one time scheme and one location to another. And that depends on, everything depends on that, because you've got to get the reader to a point where they're saying, no, don't go away, I want to stick here. But then within a few paragraphs, you've got to have them drawn into the other story. You've got to find exactly the right points. And I know that if I hadn't had that sudden insight, we would have stayed too long in England in the 80s. And the beginning of the second element in the book, I would have taken too long to reveal it. So when anyone mentions that book to me, That's the one that makes me inwardly shudder. Because actually there was one chapter in it that took me a year. It's a chapter where the personnel, the two central characters, are in South Africa, and they're in a township which is imagined by me, but put down more or less on the ground plan of a place that really did exist. In my book, it's called Elim, but it's really Sophia Town. And so with the research and then taking the people through their arc, they arrive at the beginning, they get the keys to their house. At the end of the chapter, they close the door behind them and can never return. And so it's like a mini book inside a book. At the time, I thought that was quite a long time to spend on a chapter, a year, but I know different.
I think sort of writers very often,
Oh, sorry, Faye, you're going to talk about your struggle?
My struggle. I think it was a book called Splitting, which I did which was the one, in fact, in which I didn't start at the beginning, but did all the bits, and it was about splitting, and it did split, and it ended up with two different endings, one in America and one here, because even the ending split. In the end, everything was splitting, and you had to. I mean, the sense is, I think, that a book is already written, but you then have to serve it, or that you as the writer or the person is just serving this bloody book, and you have to get it right. I mean, some writers, I think, especially when I began, I mean, there were two sort of versions of it. Some writers see themselves as sort of luring a hook into a deep well, and it's the sort of group unconscious in a way, and you hook something, but it's a sort of swimming around in this sort of murky pool, trying to get at the right thing, which is the problem. Or other people will describe it as a hook that you have to put up into the sky and pull down the right thing, but it's this hook, but you've got to get it right, and then you get it done and it's not quite right, and then you have to do it again. But it is, as it were, that the book is there, if only you could get it right, and the sense that you haven't yet got it right can be very onerous. So It's not an easy life, writing. I mean, it's a very peculiar kind of thing to be doing anyway.
But that is so true. The book is there, like the statue is in the marble.
Yes.
But it's the hacking it out.
Hacking it out, which is the problem. Yes, it's the hacking away.
I would like to ask Hilary Mantel why she has chosen, in her most recent fiction, two popular thugs from history, I refer to Danton and Cromwell, and turn them into what appear to be very likable and interesting people. And yet those around both these characters are presented as either buffoons or very unattractive people.
Sorry, I missed a little bit of your question. You were saying that Danton and Cromwell have become attractive and likeable people, and then...
I said that my understanding of Cromwell and Danton are that they are sort of the well-known thugs from history, rather thuggish, violent people.
Yes, well, I think...
The bad men in history, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where... I hate the word creativity, but I think this is where it comes in. You examine the historical record with a skeptical eye. You do not belong to a school of history or school of thought. You are able to operate independently. Now, in fact, I think that if you were to read French historians, you would find Danton's quite the favourite. They all want to be him, you see. They're taken by his swaggering masculinity. He's not a great favourite of mine. And in fact, I remember writing A Place of Greater Safety, writing its final drafts, getting so harrowed and shocked by the depth of his twisty, manipulative corruption that I had to stop and go away for the weekend before I could agree to come back and sit down at the table and we'll work together again. Cromwell is a slightly different case in that for many, many years, no serious academic historian has fallen for this pantomime villain line. And Cromwell's centrality to the reign of Henry VIII was recognised a long time ago. Popular history and fiction and drama just haven't caught up. So, you know, at any one time, there are any number of versions of these people walking about. And what I've done is just add a couple more. And in the case of Cromwell, I think this gap that has opened between the academic historian and the popular historian, I hope will now close. There are 3 Cromwell biographies in the works that I know of. And I hope they will give us a different picture from the one we're used to. And I hope they will all be accessible to the general reader. But here's a very, very difficult subject for biography. Not only because of the part of his early life that is missing, but because of the overall complexity of his work. It gives, you have to ask yourself the question, do I discuss this man under topics? Or do I attempt to keep the reader au fait with everything he's doing on a single day? And either approach is baffling to the reader. And it might be, and I say this tentatively and with due humility, it might be that there are people about whom you can't write a satisfactory biography, but you can write a satisfactory novel. I think it's possible. I found one, but we'll see.
Yeah, one final question, and then we will.
Hi, I'm interested in what sort of process you go through when you're researching your novels and sort of how long that takes.
Well, I don't research the novels. Unless you're writing a historical novel, when you do. But then, I've just written a sort of historical trilogy, but only at the turn of the last century, which is within living memory, so it's a very different thing. And that I could do with the aid of Mrs. Beeton, 1902, and the Sears and Roebuck catalogue, 1903, which are available, and Google. And I couldn't have begun to have written this sort of even 10 years ago, because I wouldn't have had the patience to do it. Really, I have written a novel a year for the last, I can't think how long, more or less, because this is what my contracts have said. And I never sort of realized, I just sort of you didn't realize that you were, at least I didn't, that you were kind of allowed to stop. and so it has been a completely different way of writing and of doing what I did. And actually, I write very fast, but if I have one a year, then I spend 9 months not writing it, which in a way is simply plunging around in your unconscious, writing these pages until actually you have more or less, you have arrived, and then sheer desperation makes you start. And then, so on the whole, it's sort of one a year. But I can see, we might get down to one every 2 years.
I think for me, research is just an ongoing process. it's impossible with the kind of fiction I've been trying to write to say, I now know enough. So it rolls on through the life of a book. And until you come to write a particular scene, you often don't know what you need to know. That's when you find out what's missing. And it might be something as small as a detail of everyday life, or it might mean that you just need another perspective on a historical question, or you might do a last-minute bit of checking and find something you didn't expect. So I really see research as a creative process running alongside the writing. As you can imagine, the Cromwell novels have been labour-intensive, but I absolutely go along with what Faith said about the way research has changed, because I think that the 4 years' work I put in initially on the first of the novels is obviously, I've got stuff there that takes me on in the story, but those 4 years would have been 10 if I'd been doing it the old-fashioned way. It shortens the process immensely when, instead of trailing off to a library, you can summon up documents from your desk.
And you know what the carriage looks like they're going to get into, so you know how many of them are going to get into it, or how many have seats to sit on, because you've seen a picture, so it doesn't hold you up. But I think it is a kind of detail which is so fascinating to find out.
I mean, yes, as long as you
domestic
believe
detail,
it.
I like. Yes, no, you have to believe. But somebody will tell you.
I can see Chris looking at his watch, and I know that we have to leave. Can I myself just thank you both for enormous generosity of spirit towards each other and towards all of us, and sharing. And if I can just say, as a PhD supervisor, which I've been many times, I now realize how really boring I am, because I tend to say, instead of saying cut off the first 3 paragraphs, I say, before you say it, tell us what you're going to say, and then when you've said it, tell us what you've said. And I now realize that I'm the absolute opposite of creative. So Dr. Mantel, thank you for showing us what it all is about.